Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello to everyone online and joining us live today. We're so excited you could join us. Welcome to the final webinar for the 2019 Young Pacific Leaders Small Grants Program. We're again glad that you could join us today, and this is really a chance for you all to ask your questions. So we'll be sure to give you lots of time to do that towards the end. As some of you know, my name is Phoebe Hybeck, and I am a Program Development Officer on the Program Development team here at Cultural Vistas. We are the implementing partner for the YPL Small Grants Program, which is funded and made possible by the U.S. Department of State, the U.S. Embassy, New Zealand. As a reminder, this program is only open to the alumni of the Young Pacific Leaders Program and is an opportunity for those alumni to apply for seed grant funding for a project that they want to implement. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the last webinar leading up to the Small Grants Program's application deadline, which is this coming Thursday, April 18th, 2019. You'll hear me say that probably about 10,000 more times in this presentation. But again, the deadline is this week. Don't forget, don't miss it. You've all tuned in for the past few weeks. We want to make sure that you know that the deadline is this week. All of the applications must be submitted via the online portal or via email to yplgrants@culturalvistas.org. That is only if you are using one of the requested PDF applications. And again, that's by this Thursday at 11:59 p.m. New Zealand local time. Please also do email us anytime at the beginning of this week if you have any difficulties accessing or submitting the application. We can be reached at the same email, which is yplgrants@culturalvistas.org. So if you have any issues accessing the application or getting something to go through, please do send us an email as soon as possible, and we will do our best to help troubleshoot and provide other options for you to get that application submitted. So far in the program, we've had 3 previous webinars to help all of our YPL alumni prepare applications for the Small Grants Program. The first webinar was focused on the specific requirements for the 2019 YPL Small Grants Program, such as how to submit a proposal, as well as how to turn ideas into a project work plan and to how to write a compelling narrative. The second webinar was focused on organizing your project core team and the responsibilities associated with being a core team member. And we put a lot of emphasis on that because that's the engine behind your project. The third webinar was focused on project budgets, how to put your project budget together, an overview of the things that can or cannot be included in funding, or for funding, excuse me. If you have not already, I encourage you to watch the webinar recordings if you didn't attend live. These are all uploaded into the YPL website, and I can show you exactly where to find that. I realize they're kind of hidden on our page. If you take a glance at your screen, in the webinar section on our website, this is this little video player right here has the playlist for all webinars there. So you'll see up in the corner this icon. It's 3 lines, and the last line has an arrow. It takes you to the playlist for the Young Pacific Leaders Program, and it lets you select which one you'd like to view. So again, if you're looking to view those, you can view them here. You also can view them on YouTube as well. So you'll see that Cultural Vistas also has a YouTube channel, and you can find those there as well. Sorry, it's starting to play now. So yeah, you can definitely view those to answer your question, Munyeka. Okay. So again, those can be found on our website. Also found on our website are frequently asked questions. So if you have a question about what is fundable, how to submit the application, those types of things, go ahead and check out our website. And that again is this URL that you'll find on your screen, culturalvistas.org/YPL. Again, if you have any questions about the program, a lot of that information is on the website, but if you cannot find it, go ahead and send us an email. Sorry, my computer's a little slow today. Like I mentioned earlier, this final webinar is a Q&A webinar to help answer any last-minute questions that you have before submitting your application and applying for the program. For those of you who are watching live, please feel free to submit your questions that you have in the chat box and I will answer them during the Q&A part of today's session. If you're not attending live, you can also email the questions to yplgrants@culturalvistas.org and we will be sure to get back to you right away. We know that the deadline is approaching very, very quickly, and so we are monitoring our inbox uh, at all hours. So be sure to email your questions there and we'll get you a response pretty quickly. This webinar recording will also be uploaded into the YPL website's playlist by Wednesday, New Zealand time. So again, you can access that on the website or on the YouTube channel for Cultural Vistas. We do recommend that you watch them before applying, especially the budget webinar. That has a lot of great information on what is fundable and what is not fundable. So to get our webinar started today, I wanted to remind you of the YPL Small Grants Program timeline. You'll find the remaining dates distinguished in blue on the slide on screen. Be sure that you are familiar with this timeline before applying. Again, the application deadline is this Thursday, April 18th at 11:59 p.m. You'll see in the blue highlighted items, those are the deadlines or the items on the timeline still to come. Project selected teams will be notified in late May. So those are the two big ones right now with the application process. Again, from this timeline, and most importantly, don't forget the deadline to apply is April 18th, 11:59 p.m. New Zealand time. That's again this upcoming Thursday. And the application can be accessed via this link. When you click on the link, it will take you to our website and you can select here the Apply Now button and you'll find the full application. If you need a PDF application, go ahead and send us an email to the yplgrants@culturalvistas.org email address. As long as I see that you will do that and we'll get that to you as soon as possible. Just a few things to remember as you put your project proposal together. You should be sure to include all required aspects of the application and project. We talked about this in the first webinar. It's critical for highly competitive grant funding opportunities that you include all of the required and requested items. This signals that you're able to comply with the requirements as well as indicates your ability to follow structure and the request from the funder. The online application, which you're looking at right now, is the first of 6 required pieces for your proposal submission. The fully completed application includes this completed online application through this portal or via PDF, the uploaded documents or attachments, which are the resumes or CVs of all 3 core team members, your project abstract, which is a maximum of 100 words, your project description, which is a maximum of 1,000 words, the completed provided project budget, which can be up to 10,000 USD, and the photo page of all core team members' passports. You can also upload supported documents as well in your application if that's something that you'd like to include. And the amount of supported documents that you can include is up to 5. Once you are finished completing the form and uploading the documents, you scroll all the way down to the bottom, agree to all of the conditions, and then submit the application. You'll receive a submission request confirmation upon clicking submit. Additionally, you will receive an email to the project leader's indicated email on the application. Please do be sure that you receive both notifications, as this indicates that your application was submitted successfully. And if you do receive those notifications and include all of the above, you will have submitted a completed application. So here are just a few things before we get started with questions to remember for the project application and proposal before submitting. The first, be sure you have met the eligibility requirements. Those are all listed at the top of the application. Make sure you are applying for funding up to 10,000 US dollars. Again, you must be able to demonstrate in your budget the anticipated expenses that match the funding you are requesting. You do not have to apply for the full 10,000. You can apply for up to 10,000 US dollars. And then lastly, be sure that you have 3 core team members, and one of which has to be a YPL alumni. Everyone on the team does not have to be a YPL alumni, but at least one core team member does. Now, to get the Q&A started, I'll answer any questions that you all have. Feel free to chat them in our chat box, and we will be sure to get you an answer. Any pending questions on the line today? Doesn't look like we have any in the moment. What I've done is I've compiled a list of the questions that we've received to our inbox throughout the lead up to the application period, or to this week, excuse me. And so I'll just go ahead and read through some of those in the case that they are helpful for you all. We do have 2 questions. Okay, first, the line is choppy. What did you say after the attached documents? So after you attach the documents, you just scroll down to the bottom swung and make sure that you've agreed to all of the terms and conditions, read through those, submit the application, and you should receive it will take you to another screen and it will say submission request successful. And then you'll also receive an email saying that your application was successfully submitted. And this email will go to the project leader's email that was indicated on the application. So do make sure it's an email that's frequently checked. Just want to make sure before we continue. Can everybody hear me okay still? Awesome. Our next question is from Muñeca. If one core member cannot make the training, is that okay? So we actually decide this on a case-by-case basis, pending the reasoning as to why they cannot make it. It is required that all 3 members attend, so we will do our best to provide those resources, but it's really important to have all 3 members at the kickoff workshop because this is where you all have the chance to take the feedback that we've provided to the selected teams, as well as the new information we've given on grant management, budget management, that kind of thing, and adjust your work plan if needed. So it's really a time for you all to work together as a team. And so it's important that all 3 of you are there so that you can talk through and agree what the right steps are in terms of any changes you need to make. So again, it's really important to have all 3 members there, but on a case-by-case basis, we are able to make exceptions. You just have to communicate that to us if you were to be selected. So we don't have any more questions in the chat box. I'll just run through questions that we've had come through so far in our previous webinars and also into our inbox over the past few weeks. The first question is, does our budget need to include cost associated for participation in the kickoff workshop and debriefing seminar? The answer to that question is no. You do not need to include any cost associated with the required program kickoff and debriefing seminar. Cultural Vistas will coordinate all team travel, lodging, and programming for those events. We'll also reimburse participants for the visa fees that are purchased because you do have to have a visa to come to New Zealand. And once project teams are selected and they've accepted, we communicate all those details out. So all the information is shared as we go along through the program. No need to worry about that. The next question is, can we include the purchase of laptops in the budget? Yes, equipment can be included in your budget as long as the amount is reasonable and you can demonstrate the use of that item for the project. So making sure that you need and can demonstrate that you need this item for your project in your budget and budget narrative if you provide that. It is also recommended to be able to demonstrate some kind of cost sharing effort for larger expenses, whether that is highlighting an in-kind donation for another part of the project, pooling money, or crowdsourcing a share of equipment costs, or utilizing equipment such as a library computer instead of purchasing a brand new computer. That being said, if you find that your project cannot be completed without the new equipment purchase, you should include a budget narrative as one of your supplemental documents. The budget narrative should highlight how the equipment ties specifically to your project goals. One of the things we also recommend is doing a cost comparison of larger equipment items and also smaller. This helps highlight that you've selected the most cost-effective option. For example, Apple laptops are super nice, but you can still receive the same features on a more reasonably priced PC. So we had two more questions come through in the chat box that I'll get to. Do additional support funds from sponsors need to be secured by the time of the application? No, so you can continue to find partners and cost sharing as your project evolves if selected. We've had some projects in previous years that received cost sharing or partnerships as their project went along. That information would just need to be communicated to Cultural Vistas. And there are different mechanisms in place throughout the project implementation period, such as the reporting that's required for you to communicate that information. Our other question comes from Laura, and the question is, can you upload more than one document for the sections in the application? So in the application, you can upload more than one document. However, for the project abstract, description, budget, and photo page for all the passports, as well as the CV of core team members, we recommend that you put them all into one document and upload them as one. They can be multiple pages as long as you're meeting either the word requirement or the page requirement. So uploading them all as one. PDF seems to work best for application uploads, so it's not required, but we do recommend that as a great way to make sure that when things come through, they stay formatted. For your supporting documentation, you should also put them all in one document to upload. It just kind of makes for an ease of reading. Our next question is from Muñeca. Do in-kind donations such as housing, labor, etc. need to be included in the budget worksheet? If this is a part of your cost share, you can include it in the cost share section at the top of the budget worksheet. But there are some things that if you foresee, like for instance, we had a question about like supplies that they already have. in their possession that they'd be using for the project. You do not have to share that. If you can provide an estimate in the cost share section as to your in-kind donations, that's helpful. It helps demonstrate that you found resources outside of just this program, and that indicates sustainability of the project. So if you can demonstrate, absolutely, please do, but it's not required for in-kind donations. I think that's all we have in terms of questions in the chat box. Actually, give me one. We had another question. For the budget, can it include visa or permit fees if traveling to a foreign country where a workshop for the project will be held? Yes. So with the project, this is something that could be covered under the travel section. If you estimate that this is something that you'll need, you can definitely include that in your cost. Our next question is from Muñeca. The cultural exchange component for U.S. territories, does that need to be youth-based? No, it does not need to be youth-based. It just needs to have the exchange component. All right, we'll get back into the questions. So the next question that I have on my list is, I would like to use the funds to purchase desks for classrooms in my community. Would those be acceptable purchases with grant money? Yes, equipment and supplies can be purchased with grant money. You have to state specifically how they are being used for the project, though. If your proposal states that in the proposed project, the goal is to help improve educational settings in your community, then you can certainly include classroom furniture. We are looking for projects that can be scalable, though. So think about how this project could grow or impact those outside of the immediate school and the use of the desk. The greater demonstration of impact, the greater that is, the more likely for funding, as opposed to just a singular purchase of an item such as furniture or supplies. The next question we have is, are the application reviewers more likely to fund a one-time project or a project that can be continued even after getting the initial one-time funding? As of now, my project is more one-time event, yet I do envision it being sustainable and long-term. So to answer that question, the most important thing the review board will be considering is, or I should say things, excuse me. Those are feasibility, sustainability, and the impact of the project. If you think there is possibility for continuation after the one-time event, you should certainly outline or include this in your proposal somewhere, even if the grant amount you are requesting is for a one-time event or workshop to be held within this program timeline. Demonstration of potential sustainability, really, I cannot emphasize this enough. It increases the overall impact that a project will have in the long run, which is very attractive to any grant submission selection process. Looks like we had another question come through. Okay, so the question is there any situation where a key cost skyrockets and breaks the $10,000 USD budget, like shipping cost? Is it possible to get additional funding, or is the 10,000 US dollars the max total cap? So that $10,000 is the max total cap. So once your proposal is submitted and reviewed, that budget is the budget that you have to work with for the 2019 project implementation period if your project were to be selected. That there's no flexibility in that final amount. The only flexibility we have is if you need to move funding in between line items on your budget that you propose. So say, again, going back to our budgeting webinar, this is not recommended. You should try to be as accurate in your research and estimations as possible, but there is some flexibility in that. We would ask too in this situation that that concern is communicated immediately to Cultural Vistas, because we can help you figure out ways to stay within budget but still meet the deliverables or goals of your project. And then the second part of that question is about leftover funds and if they would be refunded to the fund's grantor. So the way that the program is set up is we have different monitoring mechanisms in place to make sure that the project leaders and project teams are online to meet, or in line, excuse me, to meet the goals of their project and spend the money that they've requested. So this is why we require different reporting mechanisms as well as budget updates. And in this in the implementation period, Cultural Vistas is in constant communication with our teams to make sure that they are on target to meet what they've proposed. And so we would be able to help you course correct if you were looking like you were going to have leftover funds. Additionally, this is why the distributed funds come in a percentage, or in transfers of percentages of funds. So up front, after the kickoff workshop, the selected teams would receive 60% of the funds. After the midterm report, they would receive 35%. And then after the submission of the final report, the remaining 5% is distributed. And so this is to help prevent situations like that. Another question we have. The question comes from Nadine. I saw that international travel is not allowable in the budget. Does that apply to travel from Guam to an island in the Federated States of Micronesia, if that's considered international? So travel is permitted, because there are programs that can be proposed with an exchange component. Where that gets more limited is with those U.S. territories and Hawaii participating. So if you have a specific question outside of just this, so the question that you propose is if Guam to FSM would be considered international. You can provide travel to that, but it has to be demonstrated as to how this impacts your overall project and how it factors in. It's not just a trip to Micronesia, but it has some impact on your project. So be sure to share and demonstrate that in your proposal. The next question we have, I'm going to read through these, so just kind of process them and then I'll get to the answer. So this is in regards to passport, uploading those documents. The question is, can we submit proof that the passport application is in progress and submit the passport later when it's ready? Yes, so if you have a team member or yourself that is in the process of acquiring a passport or renewing a passport, please indicate that in your application that you've lodged an application or you've started the process to renew, and that if selected, you would be able to provide the new passport by that time period. So again, the selection for the teams should be notified in late May, so you would need to have it before then. So our next question is from Nadine. Would YPL 2019 alumni be eligible to apply for a grant in the next year or subsequent year if we don't apply this year? Yes, absolutely. This program, if there were to be a 2020 iteration, at this moment in time, that's not been confirmed. But if there were to be, uh, all YPL 2019 alumni, as well as all previous years alumni who have not participated in a small grants program through YPL would be eligible to apply. So the next question is from Muñeca, and it is the release of funds based on the project timeline for the overall implementation period or timeline? So the way that that's based is that so the implementation period starts directly after the kickoff workshop. So starting in July, the kickoff workshop is set to be held at the end of June. So come July, the first percentage of funds would be distributed, and then the remaining percentage of funds would be distributed at the midterm report and then at the completion of the final report. So it is based on just solely the implementation period or timeline. Looks like that's all the questions that we have in the chat box so far. Feel free to keep populating your questions in there if you do have more. I'll just jump back into the questions that I was going through earlier. So the next question that we received is, are there any rules regarding collaboration with government? This is okay to collaborate as long as it's tied with the YPL theme of civic engagement, or excuse me, civic leadership. One note you have to be careful of is to make sure that the project is not funding any government agencies or political activities. So you have to be very sure that that's the case. We do encourage collaborating with any stakeholder that makes your project a success, but do be mindful of the parameters. And those parameters include that you're not funding any government agencies or political activities. Another question we received was about a core team member. This was confusion on having a core team member be an alumni. You do need to be sure that your core team includes at least one YPL alumni as one of the 3 members. And additionally, you'll need to outline or list their involvement with YPL in the project description section on the application. So one of the questions we have is from Muñeca in the chat box, and the question is, if a bulk of the project happens before September, could the midterm funds be released earlier? That's a great question. This is why we encourage you to really understand the timeline of the program itself, the funding disbursements, and how your program timeline that you're proposing will be implemented so that they are cognizant of those disbursement periods and when the percentage of funds will be given out. This is a question that you would need to communicate directly to the funder themselves. So in this case, the partner that you would communicate that to is Cultural Vistas, and it would be made on a case-by-case basis, and there would have to be significant reasoning as to why the request for funds to be released earlier is needed. So this again is one of those situations where if selected, you would need to be in pretty early and open communication with Cultural Vistas on this. But we do encourage you to think through these things and how they match up, making sure. I know there is a question that we've received on if there are any upfront costs if you don't have the first installment of funds yet, what do you do? You can reimburse yourself with funds from the project, providing those details in the report that you'll need to have those receipts and things like that if you had to purchase items before the first disbursement of funds. That is not encouraged because we want you to plan your project within the programming timeline, as this is something that is needed for all grant proposals But there is flexibility if you maintain and get approval from your funder. So the next question we have is from Manwia. Can we schedule the last action on mid-January for our program? So the implementation period is set to end in December. So it is not recommended that you schedule things in mid-January for your program. Again, sometimes, case by case, exceptions can be made. So if you can communicate it strongly enough as to why you need it to happen in mid-January, it could be proposed and accepted. But again, it's not recommended, as the timeline for the program is what is really recommended for the implementation period. The next question we have is, can we send drafts of our application for Cultural Vistas to review or critique? Unfortunately, Cultural Vistas cannot comment or critique team submissions since we are participating in the application review process. We can only help provide guidance with program related or application questions. If you're looking for someone to review, we recommend asking a professor or outside colleague, or if you know of someone that has experience with grants, to review the documents before your submission. We're really sorry we can't be of more assistance on that, but because we are involved in the selection and application review process, we cannot comment. Is the website for currency exchange in webinar 3? Yes, it is. So that website is on one of the slides that can be found in webinar 3. It's called owanda.com. Sorry about that, guys. And that is something that we use at Cultural Vistas because you can access by date. It also seems to have some of the most accurate exchange rates. So that's something that we use here. My screen did cut out for a moment, so I just want to make sure everyone caught that last bit. If you didn't catch that last bit, go ahead and chat and I'll be sure to repeat myself. Looks like Swan got it. Cool. Moving on, one of the questions that we've gotten is, can a citizen from a country outside of YPL be a core team member? Yes, you can include someone from outside of the YPL countries as a core team member. However, we recommend that your project demonstrate that the project is taking place within the region. Your project has to be within the region. Additionally, for travel to the kickoff and debriefing programmatic events, that team member would be responsible for traveling to a YPL country, and then Cultural Vistas would make arrangements to New Zealand from that YPL country they chose to travel to from there. So there are some challenges, but it is possible. Another question on team members is, can other team members not in the core group be outside of the ages 20 to 35? Yes, that is not a problem. We do not require any information on your additional team members outside of the 3 core team members. The next question we have is, will there be a specific quota for the 4 YPL themes to be represented in the 2019 programs iteration? No, we want to have representation of all of the themes across projects, but other application criteria mentioned are most important. So we will not be selecting projects just to meet a quota for projects within the pillars or the different pillars themselves. We are open to projects with work in all the pillars or one or two of the pillars. It really, there's no requirement on that. The next question is, what happens if the budget is not used by the end of the project? We had that question earlier, and since it is an important question, I just want to highlight the answer for you again. You really need to think through your project's implementation as close to accurate as possible, including the amount that it will cost. This is a huge piece of it. Again, you can apply for up to 10,000 US dollars, but the goal is to spend the full amount of money that you're requesting. It's really important to only request the amount of money that you need. That's why we encourage you to research the amounts of the items you're requesting and inquire about estimates or quotes, because that helps to guide your budget and the amount you need to request for the program in that budget template. Again, the 10,000 US dollars is the max amount that you can apply for. You should, however, only apply for the amount that you need to complete the project's full implementation. Those reviewing the applications will look for competitive proposals, and a correlated budget with the project description increases the competitiveness of the project. If you were to have some additional funds in excess at the end of the project, you are able to continue spending the money on the project after the implementation period. However, again, that is not recommended, and you will need to clarify very in depth uh, how you foresee these funds being spent in your final report. So it's really important that you are on track and set, because, yeah, we want you to implement your project within the implementation period and spend the funds that you've requested. So the next question we have is from Taganoa. I apologize if I'm butchering your name. I do apologize. The question is, when traveling for a project workshop, can the travel fee for additional members aside from the 3 core members be included in the budget? So if this is in regards to per diem, yes, you can. You can include per diem for the members of your team that you need that are imperative to implementing your project, whether if for this instance it's a workshop. If you need a team of 5 to implement that, then you can include that in your budget. But you do need to outline that this is for per diem, and per diem covers meals that are not included in the programming. So say breakfast, lunch, and dinner, if it's not set lunches in your workshop, that kind of thing, as well as their travels, so flights, things like that, and lodging. We cannot cover salaries or stipends for team members, so be sure not to include those in your budget, as those are non-fundable items. They cannot be funded. And feel free to correct me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I do apologize. Our next question we have is, what should the project produce? Your project does not have to produce a product, for instance. It can be a training or a workshop, for example, like we just talked about in the previous question. The most important piece is that you need to be able to describe the impact and the direct effect on your community or the community you're working in. So if you do a training or a workshop, please describe in your proposal what the participants will be learning and what the post-workshop activities, if there are any, that further the impact are. Another question we've received is, 1,000 words for a project description is not enough. Can we submit more? We understand that's really hard to do, especially with all of the awesome work that you all do. There's a lot of different pieces that you need to explain, and that can be very difficult. However, word or page limits are standard across most grant applications. So this is an exercise on being concise and demonstrating your team's ability to meet the requirements for the grant application as requested. So yes, you do have to stick with those limitations. This is also why we allow for the additional 5 pages of supplemental documents to help you tell your story of your project. I did just go back in and double check, and for the supplemental documents, I would encourage you to upload them all as one document just to ensure that they get through our application portal. Um, as a side note, On this, headers and footers do not count in the 1,000 word limit. Um, one thing to remember is once you submit your application, there is not a follow-on interview, so reviewers only go off of what is in your application. Be strategic about what you are saying, what you are sharing on the grant application, and make sure it's what the grant application has asked for. Can there be multiple honorariums to the same person for different activities in different times and places? Munyeka, that's a great question, and I need to find, so for honorariums, to one person in one time, they can be up to 250 US dollars. I need to find more guidance on if they can be to the same person multiple times for multiple different activities. I will get back to you via email on that. So for just on that note of honorarium or allowances for team members, again, you and this is specifically for team members. For those helping out, professional fees or speaking fees, that's allowed. But for team members, this would be considered a salary and is not allowable. Again, you may provide honorarium to outside speakers or professionals, but for team members, you cannot. However, again, as we mentioned before, you can cover hotel, lodging, travel costs, per diem costs for food, etc., for those needed to implement the training or workshop. Another question we've received is, will funding be considered for projects that are long-term or projects that are already being implemented? Yes, for long-term projects though, you need to demonstrate and describe how the YPL grant funding will be used during the 6 months of the implementation period. You'll need to also demonstrate the impact in that time frame for the project. You should include the longer term plans of the bigger project as well. So make sure that you're providing a holistic background as to what has happened, what's going to happen with the YPL funds, and why the YPL funds are making it possible to have this project or event take place. And so making sure you outline that in the bigger picture. For ongoing projects, that is not a problem as well. We encourage you to do the same thing. There are two types of projects in consideration for YPL funding. Those that are newly developed and getting started or incubating, and those that are currently running and looking to build to the next level. For the latter of those two, you should describe again what has already been done, where it is going with the YPL implementation funds, and as well if there were any previous phases, what the results of those were. So be sure, again, to be descriptive and include this information. The next question we have is from Muñeca. Can sponsorships and community-sourced funds be used to compensate the team members? Specifically on items that are cost shared, we do not have restrictions. The funding restrictions come from Cultural Vistas or the funds coming, excuse me, from the U.S. Department of State. Those are the ones that in your budget you need to break down. The funds that will be used and provided, if selected, provided by the YPL funding. And so with that, you'll need to provide in, if selected in the reports, receipts for the funds or for the purchases that you've used the funds on. So in terms of sponsorships and community source funds, those would be considered a cost share, and that would be up to the discretion of those that you're cost sharing with to decide. But YPL specific funds outlined in your budget cannot be used as compensation. The next question we have is when you say upload all in one document, do you mean, for example, the 3 passport pages in one PDF document type thing, or all supplemental documents into one PDF? Yes. So if you can fit them all into one PDF, I encourage you to do that, as well as the passport pages. In terms of uploading, just to make sure everything gets through, upload them all in one document. If you're having issues getting your supplemental documents to go through or cannot, you can always send those through to our email address as well, and we can attach those to your application. You just need to make sure that you share the information on your project's name, as well as the project leader information so we can associate them with the correct project. So the next question we received is, what will Cultural Vista's role be during the implementation period? So Cultural Vistas will be the main point of contact for the program, coordinating program logistics as well as correspondences to the teams. Again, we'll be the ones that are coordinating the logistics and programming around the kickoff and debriefing workshops. We'll also be providing ongoing support, advice, and assisting selected teams with monthly reporting and monitoring and evaluating their projects. So we basically are the main contacts for the program. Any questions should come directly to Cultural Vistas, and we can find the answers for you or provide answers for you at that time. Again, for selected projects, it's really important that the open communication is maintained between Cultural Vistas and the project team, so we can course correct if there are any issues or help provide advice, things like that as we go along through the implementation period. After the kickoff workshop, Cultural Vistas maintains regular communication with all selected project teams, again, to assist as needed and check in on project progress. So yeah, we're kind of the go-to people for the implementation period to help make sure that your projects are being successfully implemented and you're on track to meet the goals if selected. So the next question and final question that I have that we've received is, when will applicants hear about the selection results? So all of our applicants will be notified by late May regarding their application status, their application status, excuse me. And this will be communicated to the email addresses that are provided in the submitted application. So be sure that the email that you provide is an email that you check frequently. And then for those projects that are selected, we'll provide further guidance on next steps after that. So that brings me to the end of the questions that we have. But before we conclude, are there any final questions that all of those joining us on the call today, or anyone would like answered? Feel free to go ahead and chat them now. If not, at any point, you can always send us questions via email up until the deadline, which is again this upcoming Thursday, April 18th. Looks like we maybe have a question from Natalia. All right. Well, so it doesn't look like we have any more questions. We hope the information that we've provided today, as well as in the previous webinars, has been useful in helping you prepare your application for the YPL Small Grants Program. Maybe one or two more. Nope. Awesome. As a final reminder, again, the deadline to apply is this Thursday, April 18th, 2019 at 11:59 p.m. New Zealand time. Be sure to look at what time that is for you if you are not in the New Zealand time zone. We hope to see some applications from all of you that have been joining us over the past few weeks and tuning in on the recorded webinars as well. If you have any questions prior to the deadline, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Cultural Vistas via the email yplgrants@culturalvistas.org with any questions that you have. Again, thank you all for tuning in. It's been a pleasure to chat with you all over the past few weeks. And yeah, we look forward to receiving your applications.